Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name's Steve Guggenheimer, and I'm going to kick off our App Builder Virtual Summit. For those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I manage our developer and platform evangelism, or think of it as the chief evangelist for Microsoft. And I've been around here for about 19 years, spent the last 5 years on the hardware side, so I always love to talk about the marriage of hardware and software, and today, of course, is all about software. Now, this is the first in a series of events, virtual events. We'd love to have you come out to a dev camp, to one of the many events we run to build in June in Moscone Center, but we know not everybody can get to those. So what we wanted to do was test out the idea of doing some virtual summits and see how those go over. We've had good registration. You'll give us feedback and let us know if we're hitting this at the right level. Now for the kickoff today, we wanted to spend some time on what others are doing on our platform. There's plenty of content out there on Channel 9, on our dev centers to teach you or work with you on how to build apps for Windows 8 or Windows Phone or Azure. We got plenty of that. But a lot of the questions I get are why? What's been the experience of others? So today's session is going to be a lot of other folks, non-Microsoft people, who have built apps on our platforms, talking about what it was like, what the outcomes have been, and really sort of the why Microsoft or why Windows platform and how that's worked for them. What I wanted to do today was just kick off at the very macro level for Microsoft and talk a little bit about what we're doing overall relative to developers and the development community, and then let folks drill in more in terms of what they built and why they built it. And then the next level after that in our next virtual summit will actually be more of the how and very technical. So with that, why don't we go ahead and kick off? All right, let's just start from the top. Look, we're in a world today that's pretty much about devices and services. We've got a growing number of devices supported by a growing range of services. I'll use services and apps interchangeably. Starting on the devices side, look, after 5 years in OEM, there's more innovation going on in hardware than there ever has been. And the growth of smart devices just is going to keep driving forward. You can look at the numbers on the slide. There's an increase in the number of devices each one of us carry today, and that's only going to increase. Let's look at the numbers for this year. Roughly 10, 12 million servers. We'll start on the server side. Go from there to, let's say, tablets or slates, depending on the term you like, 150, 200 million. From there to PCs, 300 million plus. From there to smartphones, 750 million plus. From there to general embedded devices, 1 billion. So we're talking 2 billion plus smart devices that will go into the market this year. And that trend's only going to increase. So collectively, building a set of capabilities that works across that ever-increasing range of devices, and there, we're seeing more and more diversity. You're seeing, smartphones, you're seeing phablets, or that, 5-inch to 7-inch space. You're seeing more and more tablets. You're seeing more and more convertibles. You're seeing more and more, touch laptops. You're seeing more and more all-in-ones. That diversity of device is only going to increase. So collectively, how we, support that innovation in that growing range, that's a trick or a key for all of us, because we all want to take advantage of those sockets. And of course, for end users, we all want our content or our information to be consistent across them. And I think one of the things that the Windows platform does very well is allow you to build across multiple devices and deliver a great, or as consistent an experience as you can on any platform, and at the same time do it with the least amount of work. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the other side, which is services. If you're going to have a growing range of devices, then what's happening over time is we're putting more and more of the intelligence or the code that matters in terms of what's changing up into the cloud or as part of a service, and just doing the basic UI on these devices. So as I go from device to device, a lot of the work can be done on the back end. Now, on that side, from a services perspective, look, we've been at this for a long time. We run some of the largest consumer services in the world. Think about Xbox Live, right? Think about Hotmail or Outlook.com. Think about Bing. Think about Skype now into the family and the portfolio. Think about Office Live now as a service, and then Office 365. So we're running an incredible set of services, which in aggregate equal the second largest set of web services on the planet. Right? One of the things that does is it gives us, one, a lot of experience in running and building services at scale, which we can use in terms of how we then feed that information back into our platforms to support it. And two, when I talk about Azure a little bit later, it allows us to build a cloud platform to support those services and to support running services at scale across devices and across platforms. So on the services side, we not only build the infrastructure or the platform for that with platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, but we actually run some of the world's largest consumer services and have all of that learning to feed back into our platform. So from a devices and services perspective, we're both supporting that for our partners and making it great for people to build on devices with services, but we're also doing that first-party work ourselves in terms of building the platform for devices and running and building large-scale services. So in terms of context setting, that's where we start from, both in terms of the ecosystem and as a company. In that devices and services world, as I go around and talk to developers, you really sort of see two patterns that people are working on. I'm going to call one of them the established or existing pattern, the other the emerging pattern, and sometimes people will call that mobile. On the established side, look, there's still a lot of client-server applications out there. In particular, line of business applications from ISVs and line of business or corporate applications that sit behind the firewall. That is a big percentage. In fact, when I look at people who do development for a living, about half the people that do development for a living are still working on or supporting apps that were built in that framework. That's not going to go away quickly. There's a lot of work going on those client-server applications. How do we move to the cloud on the back end? How, more importantly, or in many cases, do we support more and more devices coming into our enterprise or from our end users? So the notion of moving or modernizing those applications into new ways is clearly part of the discussion. But from the beginning, they still exist. They're still there. And people have to figure out, how do I evolve them? Do I leave them the same? Do I evolve them? If I evolve them, how? And then how do I complement those with the new applications we're building, either, again, for our end users or as a third party building for others? So that's one pattern that's very strong out in the marketplace today. The other, in the emerging side, I tend to call it cloud device. You can call it mobile. I'm not trying to brand it any particular name. Some people call it modern. But it's essentially building either a very large-scale service that's going to run over a lot of devices for maximum reach, or sometimes people build a very specific experience on a device so they have the greatest experience out there for an end user, and then scale it over time. In that cloud devices world, obviously there's multiple clients to choose from. There's multiple sort of cloud services to choose from. We're one of them. And then on that client-server side, it's sort of the same thing. There's a lot of history in writing to Windows clients because a lot of that is for commercial use. And so whether they use the web as a front end in a web client or a traditional Windows client, there's a lot of the client-server applications that are writing to a Windows client on the front end. And on the back end, they could be using Windows, they could be using Linux, they could be using other back ends, and of course .NET or Java, depending on what they've built it in. People choose different coding frameworks. So in the world where we live in, one of the things we often do when we're out talking to developers is have the discussion of where you're starting from. Do you have a client-server type of application that you're looking to modernize or move forward? Do you have a cloud devices pattern or application that you're working on, either building from scratch? A lot of startups out there today doing that, or one that you're have in market today and want to either bring to the Windows platform, or you're thinking about the Windows platform because you're already there about how you take it to another part of the platform. So those are the two discussions. That's generally where the conversations go or they start from. It's not uncommon to sit in a meeting, in particular with a commercial account, where you have a CIO who has that client-server piece, and you're going to have that conversation. Then you have somebody from the marketing department who's hired an agency who's actually working on a cloud devices application for their end users of that company. So that happens a lot. The flip side, you can go in the afternoon to a startup who's only on the cloud device side, working on a service for broad reach, trying to think about, hey, how am I going to get to the maximum number of sockets? Am I going to use advertising as my framework, in-app advertising? Am I going to build a website that's going to use advertising? Am I going to build an app for a store? How do I think about monetization? What are the models, etc. So that's, again, where we started the conversations. Let's talk about a little bit then what we're doing from Microsoft relative to these two conversations and with Windows overall. So let me go there next. All right, relative to those two app patterns, let's talk a little bit about what we've done with Windows. If you go back 10 years, one of the decisions we made was to have really strong symmetry between the client, Windows Client, and Windows Server when we started working on the Windows Server family. That's been very helpful for a lot of reasons. When you have that symmetry, when you're building applications, a lot of the services then work really well across client-server. So when you think about things like identity, you think about management, you think about security, you actually think about writing or building the applications, all of those things get easier because there's a lot of symmetry from the client side to the server side. Now, when we think about extending that symmetry, we've done it in a couple ways. On the client side, when you look at the client, there's now symmetry between the Windows client and then all of the devices. It's not perfectly the same, but that symmetry exists, for example, across the Windows client and embedded devices. It exists across Windows client and phone. And in fact, about 60% of the code you would write for a phone, there's symmetry there. Now, that's an interesting juxtaposition relative to some of the others. If you look at some of the other models out there, if I take Android, there's symmetry for them between their phone and their tablet, but there's no symmetry in the PC because they don't really have a PC platform. If I look at Apple, there's symmetry between the phone and the tablet with iOS, but there's no symmetry there to the Macintosh. So when you're writing applications, there's not that symmetry across all three. We aren't perfect, but there's more symmetry from phone to PC, and there's perfect symmetry from PC to tablet in the Windows side and to embedded than on other platform. So as you're thinking about writing across devices, we've tried hard to get that symmetry as close as possible, and we'll continue to work on that. Now, on the other side of it, when I look at server and cloud, we have symmetry again. One of the things we've done with Azure and we've been working on is the ability to sort of run your application on-premise, let's call it a private cloud or however you want to think about it, is very symmetric with what you can do in our Azure cloud or a public cloud. And the reason for that is, as we built our cloud up, we've started with our Windows Server infrastructure capability, but we've also taken all the learning from running those consumer services, used that to build the cloud, and now we've got a set of set of offerings, both on-premise and off-premise, or private cloud and public cloud, that are running on the same basic infrastructure. And so again, we have that symmetry between on-premise and off-premise. So now if I look at the framework in total with Windows, we've got symmetry from client to server, from client to devices, from server to cloud. And so no matter where you come into the conversation, if you want to start by building an embedded application on a handheld system, or you want to build a retail point of sale system, that's going to have great connection back into either the cloud or an on-premise server infrastructure. If you want to start building a Windows client app, it's going to be easy to then work between that client app and server. There's a lot of things you could do there in terms of management, security, identity. If you want to connect into the cloud, we can do that. No matter where you come in, we're going to work with you or make it able for you to sort of build in or connect to the other pieces. And over time, that's going to get better and better. And I think that's one of the unique things in terms of Microsoft's offering, right, is that ability to have symmetry across all the different pieces. So if you want to build a commercial app, you want to build a consumer application, you want to build a phone app, you want to build a PC application, you want to build a service in the cloud, you want to build something protected behind the firewall, as you build those things, A, it's going to be easier to build them and have them work across all the different areas you might want. And B, when you think about all the services you would want as a developer, whether it's identity and login, whether it's management, whether it's security, whether it's user experience, whether it's the development language itself or the development environment, all of those things are going to be easier to work with. And that's only going to get better over time. And that's a very unique value proposition that Windows provides. All right, so my job today is to do the framing. I think that's about as much framing as I want to do overall. Let me talk a little bit on the client side just to get you going, and then we'll get out of here and let the next person up. In terms of Windows, in particular on the client, whether it's Windows 8 or Windows Phone 8, or even our embedded devices, one of the things we've really focused on is great experiences. And there's three things I think about there. One is the way you interact with devices. We've been working on natural user interface or the ability to interact with devices for a long time, right? Obviously, keyboard and mouse is still there. We've had inking for a long time. We continue to improve that. We've also made touch a first-class citizen on the PC family or the tablet family, along with it's already been there on the phone side. But we have other mechanisms for interaction as well. If you look at the embedded side of the house, if you get into a Ford car, right, that sync system from Ford, which I think is in about 8 million vehicles today, that's all voice controlled, right? So we have voice. And then if you look at Xbox and Kinect, you have full-body gestures or full-body motion as a way to interface or interact with a device. So that natural user interface, that's one aspect. The second, of course, is being connected. A lot of the work we've done across the devices when I talked about that symmetry is allowing your content to flow. So if you look at the People Hub, having the individuals that I care about, their phone numbers, contact information, et cetera, and not just from Microsoft feeds, but from Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, et cetera, that flows seamlessly across devices. From a PC to a tablet to a phone, it all flows. Same with my Office content, same with my photos. Essentially, I can have all the content I care about flow with me naturally as a user. And that's a key point. The third then is personalized. One of the things that the Windows devices allow you to do is have a very personal user experience, right? Whether it's the phone, the tablet, the PC, that tiled user experience, you can relay it out the way you want. It's not just a sea of icons. Those tiles are live, so they tell you what's going on. You can pin the people you care about, if you want, to the desktop, the apps you care about. You can create a very personal and rich experience that's easy to work with. It's consistent across phones and tablets and PC. So for your end users that are out there, when you build applications, you're going to know they're going to have a great way to interact with it. Now, the notion of this in terms of what does a new experience feel like in an application, it gets kind of fun to talk about what is an application. Let me marry a couple of those concepts together. So what I'm going to do in a second is show you a video. And what the video is, it's essentially there's a giant Coke machine in a mall in Korea. This Coke machine has a Kinect sensor on it, so we can see people out in the audience. It's built in an interactive module, essentially, where the hottest band in Korea is challenging the people in the audience or walking past this Coke machine to a dance contest. And if the people do a good job dancing, they get a free Coke, right? So you might not think of this as a quote application, but in the end it is. It's got a great natural experience. It's very interactive. It's very connected. It's very personal. And it's a ton of fun. So let's take a look at that, and we'll run the video real quick for you. I think that video sort of is a lot of fun. Obviously, there's a ton of cool work going on out there. It's a little further out than some things, but what really is an app or service really is changing. One of the things I want to ask you, hey, as you guys build really cool stuff, send it to us. We love to highlight and show off what's coming. Our partners do just an outstanding job of doing things on the Windows platform that we could never imagine. And that's what makes it so much fun, is you guys do such a great job. So keep it coming. Send us your stuff. I need more videos or case studies or things to show off in terms of cool things people are doing with our technology or technology in general. Now, on the development side, we talked a little bit about experiences and what's there for the end user. One of the things we've really focused on is letting developers start from wherever they come from. And one of the things we've done in particular with Windows 8 is sort of say, hey, it doesn't really matter. If you're an HTML5 JavaScript developer, we support that natively in Windows as a development environment. So if you build apps for the web and that's where you start, great, we're with you. If you're a managed code developer, probably again back to that line of business, C#, XAML, hey, we support that too. If you want to write, C++, DirectX, you're building a game, you're writing down to the metal, hey, we support that as well. And so one of the things we've done is created a development environment that supports the broadest range of, I'll say, places to start from. Because we know that developers have been building web apps for a long time, they've been building managed code apps for a long time, they've been building direct code for a long time. So we have all of these sort of historical places people start from, and we want to make sure we're supporting all of those. And the nice thing is, we support all of them on Windows. We support many of them on the other platforms. So with phone, we have that ability with sort of C++ and DirectX. We have that ability with managed code. Obviously, you can build websites that run really great on the phone. Even with things like Xbox and embedded, we're doing more and more to support as many environments as are available. And over time, that will continue to get better. And again, for Windows and Windows 8, or Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8, I'd also complement with that with the hardware side. I talked to the OEMs not too long ago. They're busy building in all kinds of new capabilities. Sensors, near-field communication, touch on the PC side, it's going to go way up for this holiday coming up. So you're thinking about touch, in terms of the input methodology. So there's a ton of work going on the hardware side in terms of new capabilities and support for new services, as well as what we're doing on the software side for enabling you to build really great experiences, again, from something pure for the consumer to something specific to an industry or business to a commercial account. Now, the other side of the conversation besides how to develop or what to develop in is the business side. Not everybody is building an app necessarily for pure monetization. Lots of folks are. Others build them for business reasons. They want to make their service stickier, or if you think of a bank or an insurance company or some of the other things that are out there today, people are building apps to keep their customers with them. But on the monetization side, which is a key part, one of the things we're very focused on is I'll say, helping out with monetization all up. Obviously, the number of devices is key. And so we're shipping 300 million PCs today. That's obviously a big marketplace. The phone continues to grow. Embedded continues to grow. But specific then within that, how we think about monetization, there's a couple things. And I'm going to start on the PC side, which is, first off, we have what we think are the best economics. Obviously, when you build an application, we have a commerce platform that works globally. It works in a large number of languages. It pays in a large number of currencies. And in addition, obviously, which is in line with the marketplace, if you build an app, you get 70% of the revenue back. Now, that's a starting point. If you cross $25,000 threshold, you get 80% of the revenue back. Right? And there's not a lot of other platforms that are out there doing that today. In fact, there's none. And so that monetization, trying to improve that for our developers, that's one key. The second is flexibility. Because one of the things that's key is not everybody wants to necessarily use our commerce engine or commerce platform. And so one of the things we allow people to do is bring their own. And again, that's unique to the Windows platform. And part of the reason for that is there are a lot of applications or services out there today that run on somewhat thin margin. If you think about a service that aggregates content, whether it's a video movie service or a book service or a music service, they're getting content from someone else, aggregating it into a great experience, and then reselling it. But that means their margins are thin. So one of the things we do is let you bring your own commerce engine if you've got something optimized for your business. That's unique and differentiated on Windows. The same thing for the ad platform. If you want to use our ad platform, great. But if you want to bring your own ad platform, we support that as well. So that flexibility in terms of using our commerce engine, using your commerce engine, using our ad platform, using your ad platform, having monetization at the same as the market, but if your app goes over $25,000, having more of that cash coming back to you, those are all ways that we're trying to work with the community to sort of improve the economics. Because good, bad, or indifferent, there's a very small sliver of people that are actually making money on store-based applications today. And when you look at the store-based applications market, it's 20 billion going to 25 billion, so it's growing fast. But the traditional, I'll say complicated app space, the big pieces, whether it's a big game, take a Halo or a, Call of Duty, or a big application, think of Office, for example, or SAP, that market's $300 billion. So there's still a huge gap between sort of the consumer apps that go into stores and the large apps that go with, whether it's commercial or consumer, into very dedicated spaces. So trying to be flexible on the commerce side and give as much money back to the developers as we can and have flexibility, that's the second area that we're working on. So one is that flexibility in terms of where you start building your app. The second is flexibility and trying to do more in terms of economics. So talked a little bit about the store, talked a little bit about, or the economic side, talked a little bit about sort of building apps. One thing I want to do is I just want to make a connection to our cloud services in Azure. Today, the rest of the day, we're going to focus on those store apps or Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8 applications. One thing I would highlight is on the cloud side, we do have platform as a service offering with Azure. We now have infrastructure as a service offering. And we focused on a couple things here that I think are at least worth highlighting. One is that symmetry again. The ability to build an application and be both on-premise and off-premise, in particular for corporate or commercial developers, that's a super powerful statement. There's no other offering in the industry that's going to allow you to sort of build an application, run it in your private cloud, move it over to your, to the public cloud, and go back and forth very seamlessly. Right? So that's a starting point. The second is, I'll just say, built for the cloud. All of the learning we've done, again, from Xbox Live and from Office 365, we're running some of the world's largest scale services on our cloud. And so it's built for scale, it's built for the cloud. I would say, honestly, I've been in the server and tools division about 8 years ago. About 8 years ago, our mentality is probably partly on-premise and partly cloud, and those were well blended. I'd say it's almost all cloud today, with on-premise still being there, but cloud is the starting point for the dialogue. So there's really been a shift in terms of how we think about what we're building and building for the cloud first. The other thing that I don't think most people know is it's very open. If you want to host Linux VM in our infrastructure as a service offering, we support that. If you want to use Hadoop, no problem. Node.js. One of the things that we've done is we work very hard to make sure on the cloud side we have a very open environment. We can work with all kinds of tools, all kinds of languages. There's been a bunch of work done to make that a very open platform, and I'm not sure most people realize it. In fact, we actually have a part of the company that focuses specifically on the open source community. So there's a complete, wholly owned subsidiary within Microsoft that works on, it's called OpenTech, Microsoft OpenTech, that works on open source projects. We have people contributing into the open source community. We have open source community contributing with us, and a lot of that feeds into what we're doing in our cloud efforts there with Azure. The last thing I say is enterprise scale. I always think that one's fun because I show Halo 4. When we launched Halo 4 and you think about Xbox Live, I think of Halo 4 as mission critical because if that service goes down, I'm going to hear about it from my 15-year-old. And so on one hand, it may not be mission critical in the common sense, but running Office 365 really is. Mail is truly mission critical. So running services at scale is clear. So one thing I'd ask you is, as you think about building your application, if you're thinking about services on the back end for that application and a cloud environment, please think about Azure. I think we have a lot to offer in that space, and there's more coming. So happy to spend some more time in another virtual summit on that particular piece. Let me start just wrapping up. One thing I want to comment on quickly. I hope a lot of you are out there using the latest Visual Studio. It's really built around devices and services. It does a great job of connecting into Azure and the cloud. Does a great job of enabling you to build apps for stores, whether that's Windows 8 and the Windows 8 Store, or Windows Phone 8 and Windows Phone 8 Store. It's a great piece of software in and of itself. Obviously, we use it heavily around here for building our own applications. Back to that openness point, with Team Foundation Server, we're now hosting projects from GitHub, so we've got that connection back into that community. So I think one of the things you'll see is that our tools are very complementary to our devices and services strategy and work really well in terms of building, whether you want to call them, again, the emerging applications or mobile applications or modern applications, whatever terminology you like. I think we have the right tool set for you. So with that, let me give you a couple pointers to other places to go. Build for Windows. Right? As we think about this virtual summit and what we're trying to offer, Build for Windows will give you the connection point into all the content you need. And again, whether that's Channel 9, whether that's the different dev centers, that's a great place to start. We want to work with you on sort of how you're building your applications, whether you're coming out of that established pattern or you're coming out of that emerging pattern, whether you're taking something that's been around for a while and quote, modernizing it or moving it to a new model, or whether you're building something from scratch that's never been done before. We think the Windows platform has a ton to offer. And that's a broader statement than just, hey, how many devices are shipping and what's out there. That goes from everything around how we built symmetry for on-premise and off-premise, or personal or private cloud and public cloud, to consumer to commercial for both established patterns as well as emerging patterns, to what we've been doing on the development choice for how you build your application, to the economics choice in terms of how you monetize your application. Microsoft has been a partner-led community for my 19 years that I've been here and longer than that. We still are. We want to work with you. We want to see great applications coming. We want to help make you successful. So with that, I wish you a great virtual summit, and I hope the rest of the sessions are awesome for you. Thank you.